Hi folks, this is Pastor Dave Grisham with God and Country Ministries here. And if you'll notice today, I'm not in my studio, I'm in a barn. Now, I promise I wasn't raised in a barn, but I have been working in one. I built this chicken coop right over here in this corner for our chickens. And so I've been doing some work this weekend. And so, as I said, this is for God and Country Ministries, and I'm going to be posting this up on YouTube and Facebook. And if you want to donate to our ministry, because we do preach the gospel of Jesus Christ all over North America, and we do stand for righteousness all over the place. We travel everywhere. You can contribute to our Cash App, which is $ for God and Country Dave. $ for God and Country Dave. And right now I'm trying to raise funds because the price of gas is going up and everything. So I'm trying to raise funds to go preach again at the Supreme Court. We were there on December 1st when they argued the arguments about the Mississippi abortion case that might overturn Roe v. Wade. And we intend to go back to Washington, D.C. We intend to go back there when the decision comes out. And there will be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of women there protesting and screaming and carrying on about their abortion, my body, my choice, all that nonsense. And these people desperately need the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we're going to give it to them. So we need help with that. So if you would, please donate. Any amount would be great. Small amount, big amount, anything. Nothing's too small, nothing's too big. We appreciate the help and the support. Thank you very much. Today I wanted to address a particular subject that's very painful for me. I know it is for a lot of Christians to talk about this, but it's true. We have a problem in America's churches. We really do. Two reasons that I'm making this video today. Number one is Barna just released another statistic, another study they did, saying that only 37% of all church pastors in America have a biblical worldview. That means 63% of them do not. This is why our country's going to hell in a handbasket right here, folks. Because you see, if the churches don't have a biblical worldview, then how can they impart a biblical worldview onto the congregation? You see, the congregation is going to be a product of the church they attend. So if you've got bad leadership up behind the pulpit and they're all talking about health and wealth and, let's all just feel good when we go out the door. So, I don't want anybody mad so I can make sure I get a bunch of money coming into me. If that's all it's about, health and wealth and stupid stuff like that, if it's not about changing the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ, because the church represents Christ in the world. The American Christian Church represents Jesus Christ in America. And if we're letting the world go to hell in a handbasket and our country's burning around us, whose fault is it? It's not God's fault. He sent his only begotten Son to die on the cross, raised from the dead so that we could have a gospel to preach. And he's given us a commandment. He's given us the scriptures to go out and preach it. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of that in America today. I've been street preaching now for almost 15 years, which is not nearly as long as some guys have been, but it's long enough to know that the greatest tragedy of our time, as Martin Luther King said, might not be the words and the deeds of the children of darkness, but it might be the silence and apathy of the children of light. Because you see, these children of light, the children that call themselves Christians, that are supposed to be serving God, the ones that closed all their churches during the pandemic just because the government told them to, because obviously the government's running their church and not God. All of those churches need to be out there fighting for the truth. They need to be out there struggling. Now, where would America have been if the churches had not gotten out and fought for civil rights? Where would we be now? Might we still be back in the Stone Age and when it comes to civil rights? Well, we need to be out fighting for the rights of the unborn. That's why we need churches to go to Washington, D.C. when this decision comes down, make their voices heard. Now, there were some that did on December 1st. I'll give them credit for that. They did show up. But you know what? When they argued for gay marriage back in 2015, they didn't show up. They didn't. There was 20,000 pro-gay marriage supporters out there in April of 2015, because I was there. I was there for that too. That's what our ministry does. We're extremely active and involved. So we were there, but there was probably I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen. There was less than 100 for sure Christians there supporting God's covenant of marriage. And guess what? We got gay marriage. And now, the second thing that's disturbing me is that there's going to be a drag queen show in a so-called church in Naples, Florida, at the United Church of Christ, a so-called Christian church, but it's a synagogue of Satan. It's going to be on Saturday. They're going to be dancing provocatively in front of the kids and doing all this disgusting sexual stuff in front of children. And they're going to be reading these books that have been banned in most schools across the United States because they're considered pornographic. Now, I've been on the phone all day today, off and on, all day. I've been trying to work on this chicken coop, but I've also been on the phone all day trying to garner support to go out against this thing. I've been on the phone with United States congressmen's offices in Washington, D.C., calling their aides and talking to them. And when I spoke to the 19th District Congressman for the state of Florida, I believe his last name is Byron, his office was totally unaware that this was going on in their district. So I was the first one that called, and I told them about what was going on, and they said they were going to have a meeting later this morning, and they were going to tell the congressman about this, make him aware of it so that he could make a statement and maybe garner some support against it. And I've left messages with state senators on the state level and congressmen on the state level as well. And I was on the phone with the Naples Police Department, because there is actually a law in the state of Florida that says if you expose children to pornography, you're guilty of a sex crime. And I really do think this church is going to be violating that state statute by exposing children to this pornographic material that's been banned in schools all across America. But for some reason, I get this impression that you could probably poll the pastors within a 10-mile radius of this so-called church that's going to have this drag queen show, and I bet you couldn't find 5 of them that are willing to even talk about going out there. I don't know. I'm going to find out, because I'm going to make some phone calls to some churches that are very nearby. And I'm going to say, hey, look what's going on in your backyard. You going to step over there and stand for righteousness and say something about it? You going to have the backbone to do that, or are you too afraid of losing donations, too afraid of losing money? Because unfortunately, that's what a lot of American Christian churches are all about. They're all about the money. They're not all about standing for righteousness. They're not all about standing with God. They're not all about preaching the gospel to a lost and dying world. They're not about that at all, because if they were, I'd see them out there with us. But when I go to abortion clinics, the second thing that disturbs me the most, more than just slightly less than what goes on inside the abortion clinic, is the empty sidewalks outside the abortion clinic that should be occupied by God-fearing Christians who can't stand the fact that children are being murdered inside that place. That's what bothers me almost as much as what goes on inside, is the empty sidewalk spaces where the Christians are not standing, because they don't have the backbone. I guess they got better things to do. They just drive by the abortion clinics going, we got this bake sale for the youth group going on. It's real important. Yeah, babies are being murdered by abortion every day in this country. People are fighting against Roe v. Wade. That's why it's sitting in the Supreme Court. No thanks to many of the churches in America, I can tell you that. As many of the churches are lazy and wicked servants who are not doing anything for the kingdom of God. They're doing everything for their own little kingdom inside their 4 walls. Folks, the church is not a building. God doesn't value those buildings. He doesn't care one iota. He didn't die on the cross for a building. He died on the cross for the church. For the church. He died on the cross for men to get saved. That's what he cares about. Okay? The cross is all about salvation. If you're sitting in your church on your butt doing nothing and not going out and trying to get people saved, then how are you fulfilling the mission of the cross? How are you fulfilling Christ's mission on the earth? Because the church in America is the moral conscience of America, and it is the representative, the ambassadors of Christ in America, trying to get America saved again. That's what we need. America's never going to be great again until America comes back to God again. And America's never going to be saved again if Christians don't get off their butts again and get out into the world and get out into the culture and go out and preach the gospel. You know, there's about as much chance of that as these chickens back here going out and preaching the gospel, really. Because a lot of Christians are just too chicken to go out and do it. It's upsetting. It's very upsetting. It's upsetting that Barna has to come out with a study that says only 37% of all pastors behind the pulpits preaching have a biblical worldview. Only 37%, 63% do not. Because they care more about the culture, what the culture thinks, and not hurting people's feelings than they do spitting in the face of Christ on the cross and hurting God's feelings. Folks, we got better things to do than to worry about money. Now, I know I asked for donations at the beginning of this. That sounds a little hypocritical, but it's not. I'm not asking for donations so I can, fly in some private jet or so I can get some fancy schmancy hotel. I don't care if I've slept in the back of my truck. I do that a lot when I travel. I sleep in the back seat of my pickup because I don't want to spend your money that you donate, that you've worked hard for and that you donate to this ministry. I want to take every dime of it and put it in the gas tank so I can go, or put it on the table so I can eat food to keep me going so I can go. Fuel for me, fuel for the truck, so I can go and preach the gospel. We buy banners, bullhorns. We buy gospel tracts. Just the other day, we went to the Texas Tech graduation this past Friday. Me and Chris Sanders, a brother in Christ of mine, a great brother in the Lord, right in the Lubbock area. We went and preached the gospel to the graduating students as they were going in, and their families going in, and we handed out over 1,000 gospel tracts. You paid for those tracts with your donations. Now, a lot of this I pay for out of my own pocket. A lot of our ministry, most of our ministry is funded out of our pocket because we don't get that many donations. We'd like to get more, but it's not about the money. See, if I was preaching for the money, I'd be having a different message here. Okay, if I was preaching for money, I'd have a message that would make you feel real good. It'd lift you all up and send you out on your way. You're blessed, you're healthy and wealthy and wise. Send you on your way, and maybe you'll go straight to hell, but you'll feel good about it. That's not what I want to do. That's not what any Christian should want to do. What Christians want to do is they should bring conviction on the world of sin, because that's one of the functions of the Holy Spirit, is to bring the world into conviction of sin. Because that is the problem in the world. It's not a problem. Jesus didn't die on the cross to save the whales. He didn't die on the cross to save the environment. He died on the cross to save men's souls, because sin is the problem and Jesus Christ is the solution. He is the answer. And we need people going out and giving the answer to the world that is drowning in the problem, neck deep in the problem. And they need to be rescued by the gospel of Jesus Christ. America is not going to survive without God. If you think America can be great without God, you're a fool. America was born because God allowed it. God blessed this nation, and He allowed us to rise up, and He has blessed us abundantly with prosperity and with freedom. But we're going to lose both of those if we do not turn this country back to God. And if we don't turn this country back to God, you're going to lose your freedoms to worship in your church and have your little bake sale for your youth group. You're going to lose your church too. Or you're going to cower down to the demands of the government, just like in China. They're going to say, well, here's what you can preach and here's what you can't preach. And if you're interested in money, you'll comply, because you don't really care about the truth. You just care about the money. But if you do care about the truth, you're not going to want to do that. Now, we need help in stopping this drag queen story hour, this drag queen show they're going to put on in front of children. Now, let me remind you, this is in Naples, Florida. It's in Collier County, Naples, Florida. And it is the United Church of Christ. It's at 5200 Creighton Drive. Or I think that's it, Creighton Drive. And it's going to be on Saturday. Give the church a call and tell them you don't want this happening. Okay, give the senators, give the congressmen a call, give the state senators and state congressmen a call, and give the police department a call. Tell them you don't want this nonsense going on. Tell them you hate this garbage and you don't want to deal with it. You don't want to see it because you don't want to see the perversion of children. You don't want to see the grooming of children. Why do you think they're doing this? Why do you think that they're bringing children into a so-called church so they can have a drag show? Why do you think they're doing that? Because they're trying to indoctrinate children into their lifestyle. These people don't reproduce, they recruit. That's the only thing they can do. And they're trying to convert the children of America to being perverts like they are. And if the church remains silent, you know, Martin Luther King said this. He said, and it may come to pass that the greatest tragedy of our time will not be the words and the deeds of the children of darkness, but the silence and apathy of the children of light. That could be the greatest tragedy this country's ever known, is if you sit around and do nothing and you watch your country fall and then you cry out to God, God, why aren't you helping us? Why didn't you answer the call when I called you? You see, God is calling America right now. Get your butt out of your pews and get your butt out into the streets. Get your carcasses out of the church buildings and go out into the culture and preach the gospel. Stop sitting around watching sports and watching Netflix and entertaining yourself. Now, do you think that when you were a child, if your parents told you to go clean your room and then you didn't clean your room, but you were in there playing with toys, that when they came in and caught you, you didn't get in trouble? Well, let me ask you this. You're supposed to be cleaning up this mess. If God comes back and catches you playing with toys and watching Netflix, are you going to be in trouble? You bet you are. You're going to be in big trouble. So you better get your life right. You better get off your pew and out into the streets and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. You better stand for righteousness. You better start showing up and standing against this darkness, or you will fall into darkness, because that's where our country is headed. It's headed to hell in a handbasket, and it's headed there because the people behind the pulpit are not leading their congregations out to the streets, and because the people in the pulpits are not going out to the streets. And if your pastor doesn't agree with you, leave your church, okay? Leave your church. If your pastor criticizes you for going out and standing for righteousness, then your pastor is not working for God. Leave your church, okay? All right, once again, if you want to donate to our ministry, you can donate to our Cash App. It's $ for God and Country Dave, $ for God and Country Dave, and we will see you out on the streets, I hope. God bless you all.